Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us again for this episode. And I wanted to start out and just say a big, huge thank you. There's some great people who've really helped out. I'm doing some work up in Vacaville, California, and it's an underserved community where people are really struggling financially and health-wise. We're seeing an epidemic of diabetes and health problems that are devastating, right? So, when I saw their break room up at this company, Vacaville Fruit Company, a little shout out to them because they care about their employees and they're helping. I'm not sponsored by them, but I'm consulting with them right now, trying to help out. I felt overwhelmed, and so I looked at their break room, and and I couldn't believe it. Everything was garbage food. So these people who work hard all day and are sleep deprived and stressed, they're not getting good nutrition. So people are calling in sick. You start having other health problems, losing people to diabetes complications. And so the owner of the company reached out to me and said, hey, I don't care what it costs. I want to help these people. They got them continuous glucose monitors. They paid for labs and for them to go through my program. And, I reached out to some people in the community and said, hey, can we help? Because it takes a community. So who responded? Health Code. Dr. Ben Bickman, who is a hero of mine, said, hey, well, how can I help? I can lecture, I can come and do whatever, let's get them some product and see what they can do. So Health Code Shakes helped out. Rosette's, who's the wife of my partner on the Low Carb MD podcast, she said, let me send some snack, low carb snacks, cake mix for they could celebrate birthdays and have cookies and things like that. And of course, my sponsor here is Simply Snacking. Very proud. She sent them a ton of samples, and I'm seeing their continuous glucose monitors staying flat. And I'm seeing sugars go from 246 down to less than 100 consistently. And so I just wanted to give a shout out. I'm only sponsored by Simply Snacking, but everyone else jumped in to help. Ben Bakikio, 15 Minutes to Fitness, he jumped in and said, hey, I'll lecture them on exercise. I really want to help. So what I'm saying is all these great people are coming out of the woodwork and wanting to help a community. And that's what it's going to take. We have to invest in other people. And that's what this podcast is about. And I feel very passionate about that, and I'm proud of these companies. And I want you to support these companies because they're giving, they're helping, they're like-minded. Sue at Simply Snack and I talked to her and said, look, this is a small podcast. We're just getting it off the ground. It's going to be a net loss for you probably for a while, right? And she says, I believe in your cause. I believe in helping people. And so when you're combined with people like this, you can't fail. So I just want to give a shout out to those companies. They didn't do it for me to talk on the podcast. No one even mentioned it. They said, how can I help? And I think if more of us are like that, we're going to be successful. We're going to do better and we're going to help more people. So thank you for listening. And thank you for your continued support. Hello and welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. I have one today that I've been really looking forward to. We bantered a bit on Twitter. We've kind of had a fun time, and I kind of watched his movie a long time ago. Excuse me. And this is a cool guy. Tom Nodden, welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Good to have you. Fathead movie, Fathead for Kids, stand-up comedian. You've kind of run the gambit. So I want to know who you are, and I know people want to know behind the scenes, peek behind the curtain a little bit.
Well,
so
I've had
tell us
so
about
many
you, man.
jobs. You could either say I have a lot of interests, or maybe I'm just unemployable. I don't know. But over the years, I was a journalism major in college that was after 2 years of pre-med, and I decided I didn't want to go to med school, so I switched to journalism. I wrote for a health magazine my first few years out of college. I went freelance. That was good for a while. Then it wasn't. Then I was looking for something else to do. People had always told me I had a good sense of humor, and I had in fact sold some humor pieces to magazines and newspapers, including both Chicago papers. So I went out there on stage at open mic night and, talked the kind of thing that would have been funny to read, and people didn't laugh. And that's when I learned the painful lesson that what's funny to hear and what's funny to read are cousins, but they're not the same thing. So I kept going to open mic nights and kind of working on it. I became a comedian. I did that for gosh, well over 10 years. Got married, well, moved to California, got married, went out to California to kind of try to pursue acting, comedy, whatever. I ended up doing a lot of cruise ship gigs and such like. And then when my daughters came along, I left stand-up after I called home from a 5-week cruise gig, and my older daughter was trying to be brave. I think she was 2 or 3 at the time. And then she started weeping because daddy wasn't home, and suddenly stand-up at that very moment became not fun anymore. So I was looking around for things to do. I was kicking around some ideas. I eventually took what I thought was going to be the pilot episode for a show I wanted to do called In Defense of Common Sense, which would be funny, but common sense guy looks at issues of the day. My first pilot episode I was planning, just like a sample episode, was going to be on how we treat obese people in society. And that ended up becoming the film Fathead, because it just kept morphing as I worked on it. So that became Fathead. And then meanwhile, since I didn't want to do stand up and be on the road anymore, I taught myself programming, became a software programmer. And that's kind of what I still do today, in addition to blogging, annoying people on Twitter, getting banned from Twitter, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, have you been banned officially or no?
No, my account was suspended because I dared to question the vaccines. And it was funny because I made 5 statements that were absolutely provably true. And Twitter locked my account for spreading misinformation. And, you know, there's this little form you can fill out to appeal. And so I said, I made 5 statements that are all clearly true. You've locked my account for spreading misinformation. Please tell me which of the 5 points was not true. And of course, never heard back, and I couldn't get back on Twitter till I deleted the tweet.
Wow, that's something
that Twitter is nowadays.
That is very interesting. You know, it's we must think alike. I know our humor's alike because we think it's funny and everyone else thinks we're not. But at least they don't think I'm funny, but they think you're funny still, I think. But you know, that's amazing. That is amazing where the arbiter of truth is like they don't have any grounds to say this is where you're factually incorrect, here's where you're factually incorrect. It's kind of like when you fill out those forms online and it just says there's something wrong with the forms, like can you point me to what's wrong so I could fix it so I could get it right. And so that's something, because no one wants to spread misinformation, but I've had things that were factually, and I've seen people factually correct, they're absolutely correct in what they're saying, and they say, well, you as a matter of fact, you may have seen that I interviewed someone on this podcast that had an adverse reaction to the vaccination. Yeah. And you know, basically they were telling her, they took her down from all social media, and they said that she was doing, you know, false or misleading information. She's like, I just told my story. Like, how's that false or misleading? This is my story. This is what happened to me, right?
Oh yeah, we've moved squarely into 1984 territory. Twitter, Facebook, they're the ministry of truth now. What is misinformation? It means saying anything, no matter how true, that does not fit the narrative that they want to promote. We have always been at war with East Asia, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we've just reached ridiculous territory in terms of what they will call misinformation. And it's getting to the point where if they call it misinformation, I'm thinking, well, I should look into this. There's probably something to it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We're really in an interesting times, and you know, just because I know some of the really good docs and what they're saying, I trust them. I've seen their integrity, and when you see someone's of integrity get deplatformed over and over, and they don't have a voice in medicine, and with your background, 2 years. First of all, let's start with that. I want to step out of this thing for a second here. 2 years of medical school.
No, 2 years of pre-med, not
pre-med. Okay, good. Okay, good. Because I was gonna say, because I know a guy who did that actually. He went through 2 years ago. What the hell am I doing here? I want to be a diving instructor in Aruba. Well, I'm not going to do this. And they were well off. He said, I don't need this. I'm not dealing with this stuff. And he left. So 2 years of pre-med. So that's like
pre-med.
Getting prepared.
Pre-med, just your basic.
Pre-med
science. But no, I didn't quit.
Your major was. Your major was in anything not biochemistry or not organic
not
chemistry.
Related to organic chemistry, yeah.
Yeah, organic chemistry was a big wake up for me. I was like, holy cow, these are smart people here, and I got to study hard. It's kind of a crazy, and it's sad that things like that, where how often am I using organic chemistry these days? Zero. And that's the weeder to get us out. You know, it's sad. It's a sad thing. But journalism too. So you see the journalism that's happening now, and so I would consider you an expert in your looking at this stuff and going to school for it. What do you think? I mean, what do you think when
Well,
you look around and say, what the heck is this, journalism? Or is it just like everyone,
no,
it seems to me like it's funny enough that your career and my career, it's one of those things like the top ups give an answer and they go, okay, this is how you handle if your LDL is 130 statin run. If it's this,
right.
blah, blah. And you don't think for yourself anymore. And let's say, well, they were fasting for 3 days before this. Maybe that would change things. Maybe they're going through stress. And so it's funny because it seems like in journalism, you see all these people use the same phrase, the same word. Just like, do
Yeah.
they all independently think the same phrase? And this is how they're discussing this?
No, they're given talking points, which is why you hear not only the same phrases, you hear the same phrases in the same order to make the same points. They are definitely given talking points. So, I did go to journalism school. One of the lessons we were taught, I graduated in 82, was, trying to be objective, try to keep your opinion out of it, try to present both sides or multiple sides of an issue, whatever. And now I see what I don't even call it journalism anymore. I mean, so much of what we see on TV news, especially certain cable news networks and some of the major, it's not journalism, it's advocacy. And, I've wondered at times, like, did these people go to journalism school? Is this what is taught in journalism school now? Because if they were taught to be objective, they certainly aren't trying to achieve that goal. So a little while ago, I read a book by Cheryl Atkinson, who was a former reporter at CBS, called Slanted. And she explained that no, they are not taught in many journalism schools now to be objective, that they're taught you need to have a point of view and you need to be an advocate. Well, as soon as you are an advocate for any particular cause, I'm sorry, but your quote unquote journalism is no longer trustworthy. Not that you're going to lie. You don't necessarily bias a story by lying, although we have seen a record number of retractions from major news media in the past few years, which, if not a flat out lie, that certainly means they got their facts wrong. But often bias is not lying, it's just picking and choosing which facts to present. The analogy someone gave one time, I don't remember who, let's suppose you go to a party and half the people were having a great time and half the people were lonely and miserable and they were sitting over there in the corner moping. If you shined your camera on the people having a good time and you printed that picture, you printed a true picture. And everyone looking at that was saying it was a great party. But if you put your camera over here and you took a picture of the mopes, and that's the picture you printed, then everyone would say, well, that party sucked. You were printing a true picture in either case, but you chose which one to present. That's what quote unquote journalism today is. It is a very careful selecting of the facts in order to support particular narratives.
Yeah, and that's the thing is when it's so biased blatantly on both sides. You see, like they're just going to paint that one picture, and that's a huge point. I had a big lesson when I went to UC Irvine undergrad, and my brother, called me that night when I got home from there was a protest there at the school, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm glad you're home. That was crazy. How, were you scared? What? How?" So what are you talking about? He goes, "The protest today. I saw that. I saw on the news." And there was probably 9 to 12 people there protesting something, but they had the camera right in the middle. So it gave the impression that there was 400 people there protesting. Right. I'm like, there was 9 people marching around in a circle. There was nothing there. What are you talking about? And he goes, "Oh my gosh, you should see the news." I watched the news like, wow, that's crazy. I watched it and wasn't like that, but it's the way it looked to you, right? And that's what's happening with so many news events we look at now and the way it's presented, and it's clearly biased.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The images in television news are very carefully selected to support a particular narrative. The facts that are presented in newspapers are very carefully selected to present a particular narrative. I mean, I was aware of all this anyway, by virtue of being a journalism and understanding how journalism is supposed to work. When I read Cheryl Atkinson's book, Slanted, I realized, wow, it's even worse than I thought. And I thought it was pretty bad. So
she's broken some major stories, and she's really been on things, and a true journalist.
Yes, yes, one of the few remaining.
And you don't see that anymore. You just don't see that where people independently think and say, well, maybe. I sit back from a medical perspective. I say, how come no one asked this question? Right. How does no one ask Fauci certain questions like natural immunity? Like, all these doctors are bringing this up, and you think, how can you not address that? And we look at the studies and the data is there, but if you raise that point, you get blackballed.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's we're at a dangerous point, because journalism is one thing, but medicine, when we start seeing people blocked for saying, "Hey, let's think a little differently here. Let's think outside the box." No, you can't. Right? It's amazing to
Well,
me.
sure, exactly. And you became aware of me because of Fathead, and I made Fathead because I found doctors and researchers, and I checked their work. They're very believable, saying, no, this government recommended diet of avoiding, butter and cream and animal fats, and you should eat your healthy whole grains and blah, blah, blah. There's never been any science behind it. It was wrong then. It's wrong now. It's part of the reason we're turning into a nation of overweight diabetics. I dug into the research. I realized, wait a minute, these people are right. I used that advice to lose weight myself. A lot of people who saw Fathead told me, hey, I'm so glad you made this film. I lost all this weight after I switched to that advice, blah, blah, blah. Now, let's suppose we had today's environment just the 10 or 12 years ago that I was making Fathead. These people would not have been on the internet for me to find. They would have been kicked off, because the narrative, the official line would have been, stay away from meats and animal fats and eat those healthy whole grains. And at the time, at least on the internet, we still kind of had the marketplace of ideas going, where you make your case and I'll make mine, and we see who's more convincing. Well, that's not what we have anymore. I mean, if we're talking about vaccines, and you know what, I'm sure there are plenty of people who say the vaccines are wonderful, and if that's what they believe, good for them. If they've had the vaccine and they felt fine and they didn't have any side effects, good, I'm glad. But the fact that people are having side effects, and in some cases very nasty side effects, these are facts that should be part of the discussion. And we're not even allowed to see these facts to become part of the discussion. It's insane.
And I think that you make that point at the party. Like, you could just look at one part of the party, right, or the other side of the party. You have to look at both sides of the party to understand. And right, that is what has concerned a lot of us, because you say, look, I might be a total nut job. Let me say what I'm saying, as long as I'm not causing harm or causing, damage or slandering people. Let me say my point of view, and then everyone can get together and go, this guy's an idiot. Right. We used to be able to do that. Someone has come up with some crazy conspiracy theory. You go, that doesn't make sense because this, and to say it's the wrong answer, but you're not going to tell me what justification you have, because the fact checkers need to be fact checked, because they've been wrong over and over and over again. And people were hurt by that.
Well, absolutely. And consider the fact that early in the rise of COVID, people who were putting up articles saying vitamin D, keep getting your vitamin D status up, may help you avoid becoming sick. Those articles were being taken down as misinformation. Well, now you're allowed to say that because it's no longer misinformation, because it's been demonstrated to be true, but it was true a year and a half ago. And then with the whole Wuhan lab leak theory, if you were saying this may have come from the lab, you would get banned from social media for spreading misinformation. Well, now you're allowed to say it because it's no longer considered misinformation. So these fact checkers, I always picture some pimply-faced 23-year-old with his finger up his nose, and sitting at a desk with a paper sign that says fact checker, because these people, I mean, if they're supposed to be fact checkers, frankly, they suck at the job.
Or they purposely aren't doing a good job too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
and that's more tragic. I'd rather have someone be incompetent than malicious.
Right. And they're not fact checking. They're making sure that people who go against the official narrative are not allowed to air their views.
Yeah, it's actually incredible, because I'm a pretty mild-mannered guy, and I know you're not afraid of some controversy and stepping on stuff, and I'm getting to that point where it's like, I'm really not either. It's like, if I get deplatformed for speaking the truth, then deplatform me, because I don't deserve it.
Right. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
If I'm afraid to say what I think and what I observe and what I'm seeing, there was stuff that Tro and I talked about, when we, on episode 13 of our podcast, stuff we were seeing clinically. We say, hey, we're seeing this. We don't know why, but here's what we're seeing, and, like from your standpoint, the carnivores, I would observe my carnivores seem happy and content, and they're doing well. And it's like, I don't know why, but they are. I'm just seeing that. And so by saying that, people said, you're crazy. You need to be deplatformed. You're dangerous. Like, because I'm seeing something, that what am I not supposed to see something? So, it's those kind of things. And that's a very, it's just an interesting take on things. And for you, it sounds like you're living in Hollywood trying to make ends, and you're figuring it out. Seriously, when you say that, for me, doing public speaking obviously it's not a natural thing, but the more I've done it, the more comfortable I am. But I couldn't imagine being a stand-up comedian, having to stand up there and make people laugh, because if they don't think you're funny and you're dying, that is terrifying to me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because years ago, when I still lived in the LA area, I signed with an agent for acting. And this particular agent told me that he mostly just signed stand-up comedians and athletes, or retired athletes. And I kind of looked at him and said, what is the connection? And he said, no, your physical skills may be very different, but your personalities are remarkably similar. And I said, in what way? And he said, athletes, they have to go out there and perform in front of hundreds, thousands of people. And there's no, I don't want to do it now. I don't feel good. I had a bad day, blah, blah, blah. It's game time. Perform now. Perform in front of all these people, and they are either going to boo you or cheer you, but it's go time. And he said, stand-up comedians, same thing. You're up there on the stage by yourself. It's all on you. And you're either going to succeed or fail in front of all these witnesses. He said, it's a particular risk-taking type of personality. It's also the personality that says, I want the ball. And when he put it that way, I said, okay, now that you put it that way, you're exactly right. And yes, doing stand-up is one of the scariest, but also one of the most exhilarating things you can do. Probably because it's scary.
Yeah, and I can imagine that, because when it goes well, you're like, that went well, that's good. Because I've had times where, because of COVID, we had to give talks remotely. So you record something and there's no reaction.
Yeah.
You can imagine performing and no one can react, and you're like, is this funny or not? It's like, do people get what I'm saying? Do they understand the concept? And so the engagement is so important, and as a matter of fact, I was watching America's Got Talent, and these comedians were up there with no audience. I'm like, that is like crazy. Like, you don't know if people get it or don't get it, because you can read the audience if they're responding or not.
So let me give you a little sidebar story. So years ago, I had a friend who composed music for commercials and films. He composed music for a sales film that the spokesman they had hired was Bob Newhart. And of course, it was a funny sales film. So Newhart's giving this on camera, and he would say something, and then he'd pause, and then he'd say his next thing, and he'd say his next thing, and then he'd say something, and he'd do a longer pause, and then he'd say something and do a shorter pause. And the director was talking to my friend, who's doing the music, and he said, he's Bob Newhart, so I don't want to say anything, but I don't get these pauses. I mean, what is he doing? So my composer friend went to the convention where they showed this film. He said it was amazing. When he took a long pause, there was a long laugh. And then he started talking again, just as the laugh was dying down, which is, by the way, what you do in a stand-up show. And he said when he gave a short pause, it was a short little laugh. And then he'd start talking again. He said with no audience, he knew what was going to be a big laugh and a small laugh, just because he was Bob Newhart and he'd been doing it forever.
Wow, that's amazing. And that's it. You get it. You get a feel. You understand what people like and don't like. And then, the problem is, I think everyone now changes themselves to do what everyone likes. Right. Instead of being themselves and saying, okay, some people are just naturally funny. Right. I think you're funny. I see your tweets and I laugh. I'm like, this guy's funny. I mean, because I get it. But for me, I need a little marker there, because when I'm making a joke and people attack me, how dare you? I'm joking. I'm totally joking. Clearly, I'm on his side. I'm not fighting with Tom. I get it. Right.
Well, so here's the thing. And I will tell you this as a comedian and just as a person who appreciates humor. First off, never tell people when you're joking. They should know. If they don't know, it's not your fault. There are people in the world who are almost devoid of a sense of humor. And this was, every comedian will tell you the same story. You go and you do a show. There are 200 people in the room, and 198 of them laughed their asses off the whole show. And 2 people sat there like this. Those are the people with no sense of humor. And once in a while, one of those people will actually come up to you after the show and go, well, I didn't think you're funny. And, you know, you just say, oh, sorry. And I promise what you're thinking. I'll tell you what the comedian's thinking. He's thinking the same thing the professional athlete thinks when he's in the stands and some, you know, beer-bellied guy who hasn't seen the inside of a gym in 30 years goes, you suck. The athlete's thinking, I could give a rat's ass what you think. If you had any talent, you'd be out here on the field with me. So there are those people who just, they don't get humor, or they don't have your sense of humor. You know what? You let them go. They're not your problem.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is, you know, when you get to be so sensitive to that, you know, I interviewed Zuby. He's a rapper from Oxford. Right. And, you know, it's funny. He goes, look, there's some people just aren't going to like you no matter what you do. And they're the same ones who don't accomplish anything in life. And they're going to criticize, well, when you do this podcast, you should have done it this way. Your lighting was off of this. It's like, well, get up and do it. Show me how to do it then, man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
At some point.
Exactly.
And so, and also saying, look, you can't change who you are just to make everyone else happy. You have to be true to yourself, and you have to like speak the truth as you see it. And I think the more I step back, and I know you question this too, you think, wow, how can I not speak the truth? Because, you know, it's one of those things. How can we not have a discussion with both sides? And I think this whole thing, like you getting kicked off for something where they can't justify their position, right? When you can justify, go, look, this is scientifically proven, you know, and there's stuff like that. And I was actually like, I felt what it was like to be bombing in a comedy act because, you know, someone raised a question about something. I go, well, actually, here's what the data shows. And I'm referring to studies, and they go, we don't like those studies. We don't like that. People who have no idea about medicine, we don't like that. Why? Because it doesn't agree with what you think. Right.
Exactly.
That's the scientist is supposed to disprove what you think and say, OK, I think this, but let me see if I'm right or not. Right. And so that's the problem when you hear things over and over. The propaganda that's out there is it's amazing because people have heard it so many times. And well, that's not true. But that's what I heard. Just like we heard the food pyramid. You have to eat 6 times a day. You have to have carbs with each meal. Why? Like when you look at the data, it doesn't stand up.
Well, I think I've thought not just about the COVID issue, the vaccine issue. I started thinking this way back when I was doing Fathead and had to change my mind about what a healthy diet actually meant. And I would get that resistance from people. And I realized there's a psychological comfort in thinking that what you believe is true. It makes you uncomfortable to think maybe things I believed for years aren't true. And I think the natural instinct for an awful lot of people when their beliefs are challenged is to resist because they're in a comfortable place. I know what I know, at least I think I know what I know, and that makes me happy. The moment you have to say, maybe what I think I know isn't true, that's an uncomfortable place to be. So I think for a lot of people, it's a kind of mental inertia. I don't want to change my mind. Whereas if you've done like I did with, well, first off, I'm the type of person who's willing to change my mind anyway. But if you've done like I did and completely, well, by the way, so I mentioned when I got out of college, I worked for a health and safety magazine, right? Well, I wrote health articles. Guess what kind of articles I wrote in the 80s? Why you should be on a low-fat diet, why you need your healthy whole grains. So, you know, there are articles in the world with my name on them giving dietary advice that I now know was wrong. Well, you have to be willing to change your mind. As the saying goes, who was it attributed to? Is it Keynes or Galbraith? When the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? You know, when the facts change or when you're presented with new information, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable temporarily and look into it and change your minds. And a lot of people just don't want to do that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I thought you were going to pull up Mark Twain when he says it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they've been fooled.
Yeah, isn't that
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Something of that long, but it's that point of like there's people who've been fooled, and you say, well, here's what the data shows. Well, we don't care. I read something different. That was 30 years ago. It's different now. There's different science out there, so it's hard, and I had to be willing to change too when I was going from eating 6 times a day and all this crazy stuff. And hey, what year did your movie come out?
Fathead came out in 2009. And
yeah, 2009.
Yeah. I am that old. Someone referred to it recently as the classic film, Fathead. And I'm like, wow, that sure makes me feel old.
Yeah, but you were a trailblazer, because at that time I remember seeing that thinking, and I was in the mindset. That's why I wanted to know the year, because I remember seeing it like going, wow, that is amazing, right? That's pretty crazy. And I was 6 years into practice at that time, and I was saying, all the old stuff that you were saying. And when I saw Fathead, I was like, wow, that's pretty remarkable. And I saw it, and I was thinking, well, because at first I was like, am I going to watch this? Is this seems like some dumb movie? But when I watched, I was like, wow, this is like intelligent, and it's well done, and it makes a point. And so, it took me a long, and I was gaining weight the whole time, and I'm just trying to figure it out, because I knew, obviously, the ADA knew better than everyone else. And so eat 6 times a day and have carbs with each meal, and then have healthy whole wheat and some green shakes and all that kind of stuff. And I'm getting fatter and fatter and working out. And so now I do what you were talking about all that time ago. And it's like, oh, okay, now my life's a bit better. And then this crazy Jason Fung comes along, and I thought, if he's right, I'm going to be so upset, because he's going against everything I've learned. Right. And he's talking about fasting, and I see people losing weight, and you say, well, and I had to reverse myself and say, remember last year when I said breakfast is the most important, never skip breakfast, you go into starvation mode? I was wrong. Here's the data. That was just, but all those things just got passed down from generation to generation to generation, and doctors. And, we have these grand rounds, and everyone says, oh, this is the way you do it. It's like, okay, where's the science? Now we've gone the other extreme, where we see things working clinically, and they go, where's the randomized controlled trial that shows that this works? So like, I have 12 people here who came off insulin in a row. Is that not enough? Do I have to do a randomized trial and randomize to a different group, or would I rather have my patients healthy? You get into these kind of nutty extremes. And I think we saw that too with COVID, where these frontline doctors are crying, saying, look, we're helping people. They're not going on the ventilator. We're giving them steroids. And Pierre Corey got laughed. They thought he was an idiot. Then they realized he's right. He got banned from everything, and they realized he's right. Now what? Right. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. And I think we've all matured these last years, looking and say, gosh darn it, the vested interests are everywhere. And you say, how do I trust? Who do I not trust? When you got one study saying one thing, the other study saying the opposite. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you follow Sean Baker at all. He's a carnivore guy, and he just got deplatformed for, it looks like, I don't know, I've been off Twitter, so I was just kind of piecing it together, but it looks like he got banned for discussing a study that was against what people like. And he went through the study and explained it, and probably used some salty language in there, but he gets banned for that.
What was it, a study on diet or a study?
Yeah, he basically talking about a vegan diet and carnivore diet, and the difference. And he goes, there's a biased study, and here's why. And he explained why the study was biased, that it wasn't calorie mats. These people were taking in way more calories, and it was so it was set up to make his side look bad. And he was explaining, look, here's the study, look at the study yourself, and study it. And he was out for a walk in the country talking about it and saying, hey, I just want to clarify this for people who are confused. And he called out some people who were saying that he should be banned from social media, and he gets banned for calling out people who are calling for his banning.
Yeah, and it's crazy times. And the thing was, way back when people were being deplatformed for having the wrong opinion on COVID or having the wrong political opinions, I even said on Twitter, you people who are currently in favor of censorship because they're censoring people you don't like. I was calling out the low carbers who were kind of okay with the censorship or defending the censorship. Well, we can't let that person talk because he's wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you wait until they ban Sean Baker or Amber O'Hearn for saying meat is healthy. And sure enough, Sean Baker got banned. I mean, what was that famous saying? They came for the
they came for everyone else, and you're okay with it. Now
I didn't complain because I wasn't a socialist. They came for the tradesmen, and I said nothing because I wasn't. Then they came for me, and there was no one left. That's where we're at.
I think that's the big thing. I think that's a huge point, and I agree, is that, look, censorship is never good. It's never turned out good when you look at it. And the point is, what else do the Christians take over? And they say, oh, you're Muslim? Bad, banned, right? When's the Muslims take over? Christian? Bad. When's the vegans take over, the carnivores? And you start saying, look, I want to hear both sides, and I'm a reasonable person. If I'm trying to pick a movie, well, I want to hear the good and the bad, and say, okay, you say, well, you're saying bad things about the movie, so you can't talk, but we'll just hear the good things. Oh, it sounds like a good movie to see. And then you go, it's a terrible movie because they can only talk. And I kind of was making that analogy with you're buying a car. Like the car salesman can't say, oh, here's all the great stuff. Yeah, was ever in an accident? Well, was it, is it a Pinto and it blows up when someone taps into the back of it? I want to know all the information before I make a decision. And when we're talking about vaccination, shouldn't people sit back and weigh it and say, okay, let me talk to my friends, let me talk to my neighbors, and let me try to make a decision based on the best knowledge. And as a doctor, my job is to weigh the risk and benefits of all treatment.
Right.
And so I have to look and say, okay, if 99% of the people do great, okay, cool. But here's the 1% chance of what can happen to you. But the problem is, if you suppress that, I can't advise my patient because I don't know what's happening. If I can't look at the VAERS report and start understanding and saying, okay, look, in your age group, here's the risk, here's the benefit, right?
Right. Exactly.
Was it studied in my age group? Well, actually, it wasn't. Was it studied in pregnant women? No, they were barred. Was it studied in people who already had it? Well, what about those people? Do we not? Are they a second-class citizen where they don't count, where they need to get vaccinated again? So I think there's a lot like that, and it's not being. And what happens is, and we find that if you question anything, they say, well, you're a racist or you're anti-vax. Well, no, I just want to look at the data and weigh it for myself. I just want to know both sides so I can make it a rational decision.
As I've said on Twitter many times, again, especially to people who were in favor of censoring this or that because they didn't like it in the first place. When in history have the people who censored their opponents, who would not let their opponents speak, when in history have they turned out to be the good guys? And the answer is never. Yeah. Never have the people who censor other people from speaking turned out to be the good guys. So all these nitwits at Facebook and Twitter and etc., these censors, I'm thinking, you honestly think you're the good guys? That blows my mind, because you are so not the good guys. The good guys allow someone to make an argument, and then if they disagree with it, they make a stronger argument against that argument. That's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, exactly. Just like anything. And it's funny because when I was in Cuba, these guys were saying, yeah, we're praying for you guys. And and I said, what are you praying for? Persecution. I said, seriously? The church in America, persecution? Why? He said, then you'll know what you believe. And then you'll be able to stand up for what you believe. Because if you never have to stand up for what you believe, you don't know what you believe. You know, sometimes if someone says, Tom, why do you believe this? And you go, I don't know. I just told that. Right. Or you can say, no, here's why, based on this. Like them saying you're false, say, okay, show me where I'm false. Right. And I'll be, because that should be the rule. If you're gonna censor someone, say, okay, here's where he's factually incorrect. Based on this study, he's incorrect, and here's what we see. But how do you know some of these experts are wrong? And we've seen that. Like when you questioned back then with your movie, you were right compared to what a lot of these people were saying back then.
And if you had offered me the opportunity to wave a magic wand that would have made all the people promoting the low-fat diet, the grain-based diet, that would have made them all shut up, I would not have waved that wand. Exactly. I had no interest in censoring those people. To me, the attitude was, you've made an argument which is not very well backed up by science. I'm making a different argument, which is backed up by the science. I'm willing to let you make your point and I'll make mine, and we'll see who's more convincing. That, again, is the way it's supposed to work.
Why do you think we have this fear of presenting all the data and letting people decide for themselves?
Well, it's postmodernist education. That is part and parcel of the postmodernist philosophy. So there are two major schools of thought in philosophies. There's the objectivists and the subjectivists. The objectivists, this came out of the Enlightenment movement. This was John Locke. These were the people who were the big influence on the founding fathers. It was the writers of the Constitution. It was science-based, it was rational-based, et cetera, et cetera. They believed in freedom of speech for exactly the reasons we just talked about. You make your argument, I will make my argument, and we'll see who wins. To objectivists, words are tools that we use through debate, discussion, articles, etc., to find the truth. Now, the subjectivists don't, and the subjectivism is what led to the whole postmodern movement. That is not how they think. To them, there is no objective reality. First and foremost, that's what they constantly teach. There are no objective truths. Well, as soon as you say there's no objective truth, you're in a whole different mindset. To them, words are not tools that we use to debate and discuss and get to the truth. They view words as weapons to be wielded. And so to them, when you are censoring the bad people, you're disarming the terrorists. That is the way they look at it. The bad people must have their weapons taken from them. And so to the postmodernist mindset, the bad people should not be allowed to speak, because then we're giving them weapons. So I 100% disagree with their view, but once you understand that that's the way they think, you at least have some insight into what's motivating them. So there's a wonderful book called Explaining Postmodernism, written by a professor of philosophy, Stephen Hicks. And he kind of boils it down this way. And he gets into the whole objective, subjective mindset, how subjectivism led to postmodernism, et cetera, et cetera. But he put it in a nutshell. An objectivist thinks like this: if it's true, I'll believe it. A subjectivist thinks like this: if I believe it, it's true. And as soon as you realize that you are dealing with people who believe that that's their mindset, if I believe it, it's true, then you begin to at least somewhat understand their motivation. Don't like it, don't agree with it, and I think it's dangerous, but you at least kind of get a little insight.
Dan, I think there's a lot of that. I think, looking at someone's worldview, you see how they see the world, and it's some people see it as the happy party, others see it as the boring party, right? And so it's like it's really, it's just amazing point of view and how people are, and but this fear of hearing the other side. I've always liked, hey, you know what? If you want to have a religious debate with me, we'll discuss it. If you're reasonable and you want to hear, and I want to learn from you, and we're learning from each other, then we have a productive discussion. If you have talking points that you're going to argue every time I talk to you, it's like, I can't go through this like every day dealing with you, asking me the same thing that there's really no answer to, So that's kind of why I started this podcast. I want to say, hey, look, you see these guys on Twitter, and they may have a certain opinion of us. And I think when you hear someone talk and say, let me explain why I'm saying what I'm saying. And it's amazing. The shocking thing is, to me, because I know doctors are smart people, I'm amazed how many doctors don't step up and say, have concern. I'll tell you one thing is, I've raised some issues before, and a lot of people say, well, I won't say it publicly, but I 100% agree with you. Well, then why don't you say it publicly? Have a little have a little courage there, but unfortunately, a lot of these docs are working for big systems. Right. And if you come out and say something, then you're fired, you lose your job, you have no livelihood. And so, for me, I'm on my own. So I could just upset people and not really have those kind of, because I speak the truth as much as I can, as far as I see it. And if I'm wrong, I'll say, hey, I said that last week, I was wrong. And here's what the data shows now. But I think when you suppress the data that disagrees with you all the time and you don't want to hear it, it's very dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Galileo will tell you that. And, Semmelweis, the guy who said that you should wash your hands, probably a good idea. And he died in an insane asylum, and everyone hated him and said he was an idiot. How could these little things this germ thing cause problems, right? Now look what we're dealing with. Like he was brilliant, right? But he never realized in his lifetime. And the same thing with comedians who are brilliant. You look and say, this guy's brilliant, but they never get traction. For some reason, they just don't catch on. And then you look back, and you look at Eddie Murphy. I was thinking about that the other day. I was thinking, how does Eddie Murphy, with all the stuff he's done, he said, like, if you listen to his old routine, you go, wow. Like, but he never got like the social justice out. He never got canceled. But certain people say one thing 22 years ago, and like, they're canceled.
Yeah. Well, it helps to be a member of a protected group.
Yeah, I think that's where your friends are and all that. And the problem is, there's always a reaction. Then the other group comes in power. So the problem is when they suppress all these guys, when they get in power, there's going to be a swinging of the pendulum the other way, and it's going to go the other way, I think, and I think that's kind of reactions to politics or medicine or whatever. It's the same thing as like you said, the keto want to get in charge and go, okay, everyone's got to be keto. Okay, you can never have cookies again, or you can never have fruit or whatever, what I mean? Yeah. And you have to say, look, let people do what they're going to do. And all you can do is try to share the truth as you see it.
No, exactly. And, even people that I know, friends, family, whatever. I mean, when I made Fathead and I did the research and changed my mind about a lot of this stuff, when people would ask me, you know, oh, you lost weight, what'd you do? Blah, blah, blah. Well, I switched to this. Oh, aren't you worried you're going to get heart disease and whatever? My attitude was always, I'm going to present you with the information that I have as I understand it. What you choose to do with that is up to you.
Yeah, that's a great attitude. For me too, I was like, I can't help the world. And for me, that's what I was struggling with lately. I'm thinking, I want to save the world and say, look, here's what's crazy. Here's what we're seeing. And you're like Paul Revere shouting and no one's listening to you anymore. And you go, okay, how much do you sacrifice? Because some of these guys who really came out strong got blackballed, but they were right.
Yeah.
You know, they were right in saying this isn't a good idea. Let's double check this and let's take a look at it. Ioannidis is one of the most brilliant guys around at Stanford. And he's saying, guys, it's not going to go the way they say it is. And he was right. When you go back and look, he was like a prophet, because you look at what he said was going to happen and you look at his predictions and he was absolutely correct. And they said, this guy's he's lost his mind. He might be the most published guy and the most respected guy, scientist in the world, but he's crazy now. Look at him. But he was right still.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he usually is.
Yeah, but when you look at it, like, you know, some of these guys who really took a strong stance, some of the people I've interviewed, like Ivor Cummins, took a strong stance, and he's an abrasive guy, but he goes, look, this is insanity, guys. You have to double check. You have to look at it. And I think that's part of it. We have to step back. You know, for me as a doc, if the vaccination was like the perfect thing, and I'll be like, yes, this is our silver bullet. Like they say, this is not a silver bullet. That's a quote everyone uses. This is not a silver bullet. You know, and so, you know, when they're talking about other medicines, but, you know, I think I think we're just in a dangerous time when you can't say, well, here's how I see it, here's what I'm seeing in my patients, what do you think over there, Tom, what do you think over here, Jim? And say, yeah, I'm kind of seeing the same thing, or no, I'm not, mine's a totally different view. And so, you know, I think we have to be able to, you know, get different perspectives in order, because sometimes it may be the truth may be in the middle somewhere, where we say, okay, in this age group it's a perfect thing, in this age group it's not. Okay, great. It's not one size fits all.
Right, but we should have all the information freely available so that we can make that decision, and that's the part that's missing. I mean, again, back to the news media, you know, it has to fit the narrative. I mean, to pull up another Mark Twain quote, this was about newspapers. You could apply it to all media now. If a man doesn't read the newspaper, he's uninformed. If he does read the newspaper, he's misinformed. And I mean, I have people like, oh my God, aren't you worried about COVID? Blah, blah, blah. I can't believe you're not getting vaccinated, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's because you're getting your information from the major news media. I'm actually digging into studies and data and looking at the actual facts. And that's how I'm making my decision. And I tried pointing out to people when it was COVID every night on the news, blah, blah, blah. I asked people, if this were not the lead story on the news, would you even know this was an unusual year? You know, in terms of, do you know anyone who's gotten really sick? Do you know anyone who died, et cetera, et cetera? And most people, if they were honest, would say, no, the only reason I'm feeling all stressed and panicked is because it's on the news every night.
And just like anything, I'd heard stuff like, oh, the Russians have all these bombs. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, if you didn't know that information, you don't really care. I'm like worried about the Russians blowing us up every day. But when you hear certain things like they're moving towards the border, and, you know, when you start getting worried, and I think that's it, because there is a misperception about the death rate from COVID. When you look at the numbers, like, okay, what's my odds of dying if you're a 22-year-old kid? And you look at the numbers, like, okay, here's the odds. It's like Ivor said, it's about half the chance of dying from falling off a stepladder.
Well, right? Exactly. And I read a book some years ago that was not specifically about this subject, but it helps to explain why people are much more afraid than they ought to be. The book was called The Science of Fear. And this will make sense to you because you've delved into the whole diet issue. This will make sense to you. He was explaining that our brains are easily hijacked these days by fears. And the reason being, you still have a paleo brain. And so it's kind of parallel to the fact that we live in modern times, but we still have a paleo body. So the modern foods aren't really good for you because your body is still a paleo body for the most part. So that we get into trouble with our health because we're eating foods that weren't really designed for who we actually are. Okay, so now let's flip that to fear. He said back in the hundreds of thousands of years during which we evolved into modern humans, we lived in villages and most people didn't travel that far. If you heard about a threat, the threat was real and it was local. If one of your village mates said, I saw an alligator by the river where we get our water, that was local and it was real. So the threat was real. If you saw someone get killed, it happened locally. It was real. So anything we see or hear about, our brains are wired to treat it as a real local threat. This is why people go into a panic when they hear about a school shooting. Now, I'm not in any way dismissing the tragedy of school shootings, but as the book explained, even if you add all of them up, you know, all of them that have ever happened, your kid is way more likely to die because you drive him to school in a car than he is to get shot in a school shooting. But when you see school shooting on the news, your brain treats it as this is local and it's real and you feel fear. All right, now flip that to COVID. When every damn night on the news, first they were, you know, constantly watching the death count tick up. And as I tried to tell people at the time, if they had done that in 2019 with the flu, you would have been peeing your pants about the flu if they had shown the flu deaths going up on TV every night. So it was a death count, death count, death counts. Well, then, and there was even a guy on CNN who admitted this, didn't know he was on camera. He thought he was on a blind date. When the death count started dropping, well, they didn't want to report that. So then the cases are going up. Look at the cases. Oh my God, the cases. Well, we know the cases were going up because of the stupid 40-cycle PCR test, and it's finding the tiniest bits of dead fragments in people. These people are not sick in any real sense of the word. They shouldn't be called cases. But if you're turning on the news every night, deaths, and cases, even though you don't know anybody in your social circle who got sick or died, because you're seeing it and hearing about it, it's local, it's real. And so our brains can easily be hijacked like that. And we can be made to feel afraid of things that are, as the book explains, statistically, the chances of this happening to you are almost zero. And I feel that way about COVID.
And it's the reporting, and there was a lot of stuff. Sure, you know, there's no doubt that it was devastating for families. And I know some frontline docs who were really struggling and went through a lot of stuff.
Right.
And you can look at it, and the reality is, just think if we did that for diabetes.
Right.
Just think about that. How many diabetes vets we get, and how many of these people were end stage diabetes and heart disease and stroke and all that stuff. And so I think but you're not seeing the same thing on the other side of it. That's the problem. You know, that's what I had a little discussion with someone regarding that, because well, great, if people die after the COVID vaccination, okay, they were going to die anyways. Well, one of those same people are going to die from the disease. Something else also when the disease knocked them off. But I think you can make that argument on both sides. But I think what we have to do is really know the numbers and really understand, because being a doc, I'm privy to stuff, and I hear doctors complaining, saying, look, this is crazy. The guy's in a car accident, gets decapitated, they check him for COVID and it's positive. That's a COVID death. It's not a COVID death. That's a car accident death. So I think there was a lot of misclassifications. There was a lot of hysteria, and unfortunately it was a perfect storm too of you know, the hospitals had a vested interest. They get paid more if it's a COVID death. And so you start seeing how it all works, and you think, wow, this is really, because you want the real numbers. I want to know the real numbers. What are my odds? And then I can make a decision. And the problem is, if the numerator or the denominator is wrong, it changes everything. And I think that's one of the things we run into. And if people knew how many people died in car accidents every day, and I think we really, the term cases, I think that should have been, that was misleading for sure, because the same person could be 12 cases if they keep testing them over. A case is a positive test. It doesn't mean anything about symptomatic, you know. So on the test themselves, it says not indicated for testing asymptomatic people yet. We do that. And so asymptomatic people getting positive, I don't care if 80% of the people test positive but they don't have symptoms. I don't care. Doesn't matter. But if they're getting sick and dying in the hospital, I care a lot. So I think it's that we've conflated so many things, and like you're saying, it's just the words you use change. The perception is different than what the real reality is, and that's a problem.
Well, and when they were focusing on cases, oh my God, look at the cases. The cases are going up, but the deaths were going down. See, that should have been good news.
It's great news, because we know how to treat it better, and we changed what we were doing. Putting everyone on a ventilator was the wrong thing to do. And when they listen to Pierre Corey and all these guys, you say, hey, maybe we try this and maybe we try these other things. But we heard all this stuff about the Indian variant, and then we didn't hear they sent in ivermectin and their numbers dropped 97% very quickly. And you think, well, how come no one talking about that now? That's not being reported, but it happened. And in Mexico, the same thing happened. Their numbers dropped drastically when they started using treatment. And so I think there's a lot of that when we step back, you say, well, present all the truth, whether it fits your narrative or not. For me, if there's a lot of data, they say, look, they took in a bunch of this drug and it didn't do anything. Say, okay, we have to weigh that into our assessment of this. Why did it not work there? And I think there, just because you believe something to be true doesn't mean it's true, right? And just because you believe something to be false doesn't make it false either, or it doesn't make it misinformation. It is maybe information that you don't like, so you call it misinformation. The church is very good at that. Like we don't want to hear it if someone doesn't agree with our view. So, well, let's weigh it and see. Because if what I believe is true, then I have to disprove this, or I have to look at it and weigh it and say, maybe I have to change my view a little bit, right?
Right.
So what I love that you said was you're up doing stand-up, you're on, and you realize your daughter's hurting because you're not there, right? You're having some success, you're on the cruise ship having fun, you're going to go see different places. So at that moment you go, this isn't for me. It's not worth the sacrifice for my family for me to be gone.
No, because I didn't realize it was affecting her that way. And she was, and frankly still is, kind of a daddy's girl. And I used to, when I was home, when she went to bed at night, I would go sit by her bed and we'd talk a little bit. And then I'd sit there and listen to a book while she fell asleep. That was kind of the nightly routine. And so when she started weeping on the phone, and then my wife got back on and she said, yeah, I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to feel like you had to come home. But she's kind of been crying every night because you're not here to sit by her bed while she goes to sleep and blah, blah, blah. And at that point, it was just kind of weighing, all right, what are my ambitions and what's important and blah, blah, blah. And then it occurred to me, I'm on a 5-week cruise. And to me, 5 weeks as an adult goes by pretty quickly. I remember when I was a kid, if my dad would go on a 3-day business trip, it felt like a long time. And so I thought, 5 months to her probably feels like years. So it just occurred to me, I can't do this if it means my daughter's at home miserable because dad's not there. And, so at the time, I mean, it was like, well, it's kind of too bad. I have to give this up. I like it. I'm good at it. It pays well. On the other hand, if that hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't have made Fathead, because it gave me the impetus to go find something else to do. So in my book, it all worked out for the best, not only because I did eventually make Fathead, but frankly, I have an awesome relationship with my daughter. I love her dearly. And I'm glad I got to, from that moment on, I got to be home. And for most of my career, I did work at home. So, I was home all day. Now, granted, I was at my desk working, but I was home all day and, got to interact with them. So that absolutely worked out for the best.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you know, but I left a really busy, big practice and went on my own. And that was a big thing, was family. I want to be home with my wife and kids and not be working 14, 16-hour days and gone and not present when I'm there because I'm worried about stuff I got to take care of the next day or catching up on today's work. And, there's something to that. And I think that's something as a society too, that we've missed out, the importance of mom and dad and family and bonding with people.
Right. Well, I don't remember who said it, but I'm sure it's true. No one ever lay in his deathbed thinking I should have spent more time at the office.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point. I think these kind of things are saying, what you value and some people may not like you because you're outspoken, but I think it's saying, hey, look, I have to speak the truth as I see it. And there's certain things that are important because I saw something about you going and living on a ranch and kind of changing your lifestyle. Like,
well,
what was it?
Ranch. We have 6 acres here in Tennessee where we live now.
Well, I'm in California, man. That's a ranch to me.
Yeah, well, yeah, believe me. After, well, it was kind of funny when we decided to leave California, and I was thinking, I was here because I wanted to break into show business, and then it just kind of became inertia. I'm here. I'm trying to break in, blah blah blah, and there was this moment when my both girls were playing outside in air quotes on a patch of grass in front of our townhouse building. The patch of grass was smaller than the room I'm in now. And to them, that was playing outside. And I was looking at that thinking, if we lived almost anywhere else, I could easily afford a place with a big yard, and that would be playing outside. And then I thought, now, wait a minute, why am I here? I wanted to break into show business, but in the time that I've been here, I've realized I actually don't like an awful lot of the people in this business. I don't like the show business culture. I don't like the Hollywood or LA culture. And wait a minute, am I here so that I can make enough money to buy a big house with a yard to live in an area I don't like and be in an industry where I don't like a lot of the people? Well, then that would make me an idiot, wouldn't it? So I told my wife, I shared all those with her, those views with her, and she said, well, I don't really like it here either. I didn't say anything because I didn't want you to feel
Isn't
like
that great?
you had to give up your dream. And I said, here's the thing. I just realized it's not my dream anymore. And so we came here, and hey, lo and behold, without becoming a star and having movie star money, I can live on 6 acres. So, but yeah, it's not a ranch, but over time, we had a couple of hogs, we had some goats. For a long time, we had chickens, and the raccoons finally got to them. And currently we have none, but we are going to start up the chickens again eventually.
And that means eggs too.
Oh yeah, for years we had chickens, and we had farm fresh eggs, and my wife has huge gardens every year. But the last time the chickens got wiped out in a raccoon raid, she said, we've been doing this for years and I want to do it again, but I'd kind of like to take a little break from it. I said, fine, we'll buy eggs at the store for a while. But I think she's at the point now where she's willing to. And the reason I say her is I'm in the house working, et cetera, et cetera. So when I say we have chickens, 90% of the work is her. So if she said I need a break, I'm going to say, yeah, of course. But
yeah, because you don't have to go and do the work, right?
Well, I don't want to say, no, we must have chickens so you can take care of them.
So how are you going to outsmart the raccoons, man? Have you thought about this? Have you, with all your brain power and all the books you've read?
I'll tell you what, for a long time, I thought I had them outsmarted because we put a fence around the chicken yard. We put pavers around the fence, too big for a raccoon to dig under. We put nets up over it so they couldn't just climb over. And for a long time, the chickens survived. And I mean, these were things we did after we'd lose a chicken here and there, we'd lose it. And I'd say, all right, we got to make this more of a Fort Knox kind of chicken yard. We never figured out how they got in the last time. We walked around the yard, looked, did they dig in? Are there tears in the net? We never found out how they got in. So
yeah, I had to go for like that. Me and my neighbor, we were like planning and scheming and like calling each other. And I go, do you think we should try this? What do you think we're going to do? He was killing all my trees. He was eating all the roots. I'm like, we got to get rid of this guy. Then finally he just left one day. I think we never got him.
Yeah, and I've had to trap and kill a lot of raccoons over the years that we've had chickens. The last one, like I said, never figured out how he was getting in. We just find the chicken carcasses. And I mean, the way you can try to outsmart a raccoon and they'll find a way in my humble opinion, if raccoons weighed 200 pounds, they would rule the world.
Yeah, they're aggressive little guys too, man. We had some at my house and they would just eat all my grapes. They would eat the stuff. It's like, you can't stop them. They're just, they sneak in one night and everything's gone. It's incredible. Yeah, these guys we got a raccoon problem in this world. We got to work on that too.
Yeah.
The little bandits. But hey, man, it's been fun talking to you. You know, I love your sense of humor on Twitter. I love, you know, and you have this balance of being funny and saying this is idiotic, and then sometimes being really serious too, saying this is a serious problem. And I think more of us have to step back and be able to say, whether I agree with you or not, I want to hear your point of view. Right.
That is the way it's supposed to work.
let's sit and talk. And then you realize you like that person more than you thought, because you have other common grounds. You may not agree on this topic, but, and that was part of my doing this podcast. There's some people I totally disagree with politically or whatever, but I still like them for other stuff, and say, well, let's not deal with that. Or, someday you'll come around, you'll figure it out. One of my good friends just recently said, Brian, remember that stuff you were saying? You were right. I like to hear that. When people say I hate to say I was right, I kind of enjoy it sometimes. I wish I was wrong sometimes, though, in some of the stuff we've talked about. I wish it wasn't the way it is. And yeah, I would take that and go, oh, I was wrong. It's okay to censor. Right. It worked out great. I don't think so.
Yeah, no, it's
based on history.
It's not going to work out great. And I'm an optimistic person. I generally look on the sunny side of life, but I look where we are with the censorship and the deep divisions and all that. And I'm trying to envision the happy path out, and I'm not seeing it. So I am a little worried.
Yeah, that, I think a lot of us feel that way. A lot of us are on edge. And for me, I look at faith, I look at different things. I go, look, everything's going to work out eventually. Somehow it all works out. It always has for me. So it's hard. So we can't end on a negative note, man. For you, tell me some, like, on the way out, I want to hear some of your life's wisdom, steps you've learned along the way, and go, this is something I want my daughters to understand. I want my family to understand, or friends, or on your deathbed, like, what really matters.
So I would say, and it's to kind of tie in with what we've been talking about, as far as, you're on Twitter and people disagree with you and blah, blah, blah. One of the lessons I've tried really hard to instill in my daughters is that your true friends, how can I phrase this? Your true friends, you just kind of click with, and you like them and they like you. And they're your friends because when you are with them, you leave feeling better. You feel like you have blossomed a little bit. The people who are bad for you are the people who, when you spend time with them, you feel like you shrink a little bit. And I've told them that, like, if, when you start getting, they're not at that age yet, but when you're at the age where you're getting into relationships with guys, if you go spend an evening out with some guy and you don't come home feeling better, that's not a good sign. And if you come home feeling like you kind of had to shrink, or you kind of had to hide who you really are a little bit in order to keep him happy, that is the wrong person for you. Now, let's take that and apply it to Twitter, social media, et cetera, et cetera. When you've said, blah, 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 it's, you make some people mad, et cetera, et cetera. Guess what? I don't care if I make some people mad. I'm not going to shrink myself so that people on Twitter will like me. I am who I am. And this is the lesson I want everyone to get. You have to be who you are. You have to be the best you can be, but you have to be who you are. And there are people who are going to like you. Those are your people. And there are people who are not going to like you. Those are not your people. Do not ever change who you really are, so that the people who are not your people anyway might like you a little better. Don't do that.
Man, that's fantastic advice. That's true. Like, we just for that little tiny 1%, we can't stand that person who doesn't like us, and we want them all to like us, and we want to be nice people. And I think you're a likable, decent guy. But I think you also have the ability to say, you know what, too bad. This is what it is. It is what it is, whether you like it or not. And you can't totally be 100% politically correct all the time. Sometimes you don't want to offend, but you don't want to cow down to people.
Right.
Man, I love it, man. Any other advice for us on the way out?
Buy low, sell high. How's that?
Buy low, sell high. That's good. Calories in, calories out.
Oh yeah, that's good.
More, like,
that's good advice.
Yeah. Just lose more than you gain, and you'll be all right. Make more money than you spend, and you'll be rich. Like, it's very easy. Life's very easy that way.
Yeah. But if your toilet overflows, it's because the problem is more water went in than went out.
So, yeah, that's it. That's how it works. So
don't fix the pipes, just use less water.
Yeah. And if you're sitting there, and I love, I think there's so much wisdom here of you assessing that you're a deep thinker, and you're well-read, and you know your stuff, and you've lived a life. You've been there, you try this, you're a risk taker. And then you realize, like, okay, I'm in a place like that's where I was. Why am I working? I was looking at that patch of grass like you were. It's like I'm making more money and I'm doing all this stuff, but for what? Am I happy? No, I'm working too
Right.
much and I'm not home and I'm not in that happy place. I'm not there with my daughter, my wife,
Right.
you know. And so you start realizing, you reassess. So I'm hoping that people listening say, okay, where do I find my foundation? Where do I find my peace? Where do I find my happiness? So anyone listening, be like Tom and say, okay, I'm going to move out to, you know, do a new state and change my path. Just because I believed something 10 years ago, now I'm saying I don't really want that dream anymore. It's okay. It's okay to change your mind, change your dreams. And I think that's the wisdom of this. And I think really trying to look at life in the big picture and say, okay, what really matters, what's really important. And that's what
Exactly.
this podcast is about. So I'm glad I got to drag you on, man. I always love what you're doing. And you know, your movie, everyone go watch Fathead. Watch it. It's worth watching. And Fathead Kids. Anything else you're working on? I know you got your blog anywhere where people can track you down and learn more about you.
So I'm not really an active blogger anymore. Again, with my daughter leaving for college this year, you know, I gave up the trying to keep 2 posts a week going on the blog because it was, you know, that was a lot of work. Not working on any films or books currently. Just kind of preparing for my daughter to leave to college. Honestly, I have a big creative streak, and you know, eventually that creative energy has to go somewhere. I suspect, and I'm not necessarily planning on this, but I'm a musician, by the way, too. It's, you know, I wrote 2 of the songs in Fathead. I wrote all the music for Fathead Kids. I suspect that after I kind of finish this breather and get my daughter off to college, I suspect I'm going to be sitting down and getting songs that have been floating around in my head forever and actually getting them recorded. That's probably what I'll do next. And
Awesome.
maybe not even to share with other people, but you know, when you've had songs going around in your head forever, you feel like I really want to get those recorded before I die. So that they
Yeah,
don't
no,
just
that's
disappear.
cool. Yeah, that's a legacy. That's cool stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for joining me. Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others. I hope this makes you think. I know there's a lot of wisdom here, and this may be one you want to reflect on a little bit. There's more than is on the surface. You know, you're hearing a lot. So, you know, let you think and maybe make you a better person, maybe a better neighbor and kind. And maybe you need to reassess where you're at in life and what matters and what's important. And maybe saying, yeah, I think I'll make that change. Let me sit down with my partner and wife, kids, and see what matters and kind of go in that direction. So be like Tom. Hey everyone, I wanted to let you know about an upcoming conference that really had a huge impact on me, that's helped me on my journey and helped me to really understand metabolic health and what we're doing to make people healthier. And so I have my friend Doug Reynolds, who's the boss, who's putting on this conference. So Doug, tell us about the conference that's coming up, Low Carb USA, San Diego. I love it because it's right next to my house and I get to sleep in my own bed and come, but maybe I get to stay in a hotel this time. I don't know. And I get to speak. So man, it's awesome that we get to all meet up together and build community. We all know how important that is. So Doug, welcome. Tell people about what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Brian. You know, it's really exciting to be able to do it in person again. I think there's so many people out there that are just clamoring to be able to talk to people again and give someone a hug and just collaborate like you know, has become so predominant in all the other events that we've done before this COVID thing hit. One of the things that's come up since when COVID hit, we couldn't do it. So then we flipped over and did virtual versions of the San Diego event and the Boca one. And we had a lot of people actually sign up and become a part of that. And so what it has done for us now is make us understand that the live stream component can be very effective for people that can't make it to the event. So this is a proper live event, and I think I want to make this very clear to people that I think they think it's like that. So many people have asked how many of the talks are going to be virtual and how many are going to be in person. And the answer is every single one is going to be in person. So we will have a live stream component. People will be able to access it via live stream, but all the speakers will be there in person. Anybody that hasn't been able to make it obviously just hasn't made it into the lineup. And I think that's really important, and it's really exciting that we've got all of these people coming out and some really good names. Gary Taubes has been a stalwart with us. He's like always supported us. The first guy to say, let's do this. You obviously, Rob Sivers, Tro, Tony Hampton, Brett Scher, Dr. Ben, Amy Berger, Diana Rogers. I'm really excited that she's, on the sustainability side. I'm really excited that she's able to make it this time. We've been trying to get her to an event of ours for a while. And this is the first time. Andrea Salcido is a really, really amazing. She did one of the Grand Rounds talks for our SMHP. And she's a gynecologist. We've had a lot of comments from people from the feedback forums and stuff saying that you should get a gynecologist. And so now we have. Michelle Hearn was a potentially Olympic athlete who just like crashed and burned on carbs. And she's a dietitian, and she found keto and eventually basically carnivore. And it's cured her to the extent where she's training for the Olympics again. But she wrote this book called Dietitian's Dilemma, because everything that she'd learned as a dietitian, she wasn't doing anymore in order to make herself healthy again. And so it's really cool to have a real dietitian's perspective of the problems that they have. She's basically left that vocation because she just couldn't function in the hospital environment, and that where she was. She was not allowed to speak to people about low carb. And so that's a fascinating story. Dr. Gurpreet Pada, I think you might have even had him on.
Yeah, he's doing amazing stuff with pain management.
He's just one of the most incredible people.
Yeah, amazing.
Marco Cucuzella is, I don't think
he's a legend.
At least in this one.
Yeah, he's a legend. I worked with him in deprescribing the textbook chapter, and he's phenomenal. And he's struggled with metabolic disease, even though he's a long distance runner, and he was able to get soda out of the hospitals that he's affiliated with, and that's a huge task.
Yeah,
that's a huge money maker. So yeah, so many great people, and I think the big thing is just being able to sit down. I know for me, being at Low Carb USA, the first time I was able to sit down and have a cup of coffee with some great leaders that were just there, and they just are there to talk. And so there's so much great information. Anyone else we need to talk about, Doug?
Well, Steve Finney is the latest addition to the lineup. I've been chatting with him for a while now, managed to get him on board. Dave Feldman as well. He wasn't sure if he was going to be able to talk because of this research that he's got going on, that he might not have been able to actually speak in public. Arthur Agatston, I think, is going to be fascinating. I did a podcast interview with him the other day. I didn't even know until very recently, but he's the guy that discovered or defined the calcium score. It's actually known as
his name.
Yeah.
And the South Beach diet. He's done so much work. I mean, he's always trying to make people healthy. He's doing a lot. So yeah, it's just great the amount of talent you pulled in.
And we've got amazing. The whole, for those people that know about the SMHP, which is kind of the other hat that I put on, the other organization that I run, that nonprofit, pretty much the entire board of directors for that is going to be at this event, either speaking or at least present. And then, the other committees, we've got the panel of advisors for the clinical guidelines. You're on that panel. It's just, there are so many, it's just going to be so many fascinating conversations that are going to go on over that weekend. I can't wait.
Yeah, and it's just, and you're also bringing a lot of vendors, like Keto Mojo is always there, and a lot of good people.
Yeah.
And so try different products, and there's some great Restore program who's doing some great work through your program and really getting it out to the masses. There's so many great people coming out, so I would highly recommend it. And I worked out a deal with Doug because I want people that, sometimes finance is a issue for people. So I said, Doug, look, my people need a discount, our people need a discount. So what do you work out for us, Doug?
So yeah, we've got it. If you use the code Low Carb MD, it gives you 20% off and it's not just the ticket. For those people that sign up for the dinners, for those people that require a CME certificate, whatever they add, whatever their purchase is, the total amount that 20% comes off that total. In the past, when we gave discounts, it came just off the ticket price. But it's not that great a guy. It's actually just that it's easier for me to manage to take it off the total. But
yeah,
as a result, everyone else
great.
Scores, right? So
that helps too. And then is that for people who come in person and online also?
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
So whatever is in your cart, basically, that discount comes off the total. And the other thing is one of the options in the upgrade options. So if you only buy the ticket now, you can upgrade and buy the VIP dinners later if you want to join us, or you can, if you signed up for the live stream and you wanted to upgrade to in person, because now you realize, hey, everybody's traveling and actually I think I can do this, then you can still use that code on your upgrade options as well. So you can still get 20% off if you decide later. So if you buy the live stream and later, in beginning of August, you decide you want to actually come in person, you can utilize that code again then for the upgrades, and they will apply, which doesn't happen for anybody else. So,
and what are the dates?
26th to 29th of August.
Awesome. And it'll be live. And if you want to stay in your hotel, I think, can you live stream it from your computer wherever you're at?
Yeah. So that's the thing, is it didn't used to be like that either, but I think every time we do this, we improve it. So now somebody that's in person has access to the live stream as well. So if they want to watch part of it, in their room or something, they can. We would really prefer that they come down and sit in the audience. But if for some reason that's not possible, they can watch it, or they miss something, they can go and watch. They can go back and watch that evening or something. They can watch a talk that they missed or something like that. And then they get access. They get access to those recordings after the event, and then within about 2 weeks, we normally are able to get all the individual videos of the talks populated on that site as well, and they have access to that forever. So
yeah, it's great education. I think being able to, because even being there, I've had times where I want to interview someone or just spend time with someone because they're coming from South Africa or something, and I miss a talk, and I was like, oh shoot, I want to see that one. And so it really does free you up to say, okay, I'll hybrid. You can sit and go down. You can talk to people. You can watch it later that night or on the weekend, because a lot of us are really busy. So that is outstanding. I'm really glad. That's a huge improvement for sure. And and some of those talks you're going to want to watch it a couple times to make sure you absorb it all, so you don't have to feel like you have to take notes. And Doug hates people taking pictures in the meetings because it's distracting for people behind them. So you'll have access to the talk, the PowerPoints and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's really huge. So hey everyone, thank you. I think this is a huge thing. The reason I had Doug on, we have no financial interests. It's really just because I know the benefit of this and how it can help people trying to live a better life and getting on track. And I know it helped me immensely and changed the course of my life, really. So Doug, thanks for all you're doing and continue to do. And you're making a massive impact. So Low Carb USA San Diego, I would highly recommend everyone come out.
Appreciate that, Brian. And thank you for what you're doing. I mean, it all started at one of our meetings many years ago, but I'm so glad that you made it to that meeting, because you're doing great things now too. Thank you.
Hey, I get some good South African food out of it sometimes, so it's all good. So hey everyone, hey, thank you for listening and thank you for your continued support. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.